Hi guys, I'm Nico Docolas.
I'm Stu Watson.
Thanks for joining us here at Looking Ahead podcast. It's a very exciting day. We actually have our local MLA, Trevor Halford, coming from South Surrey-White Rock to join us. Stu, how long has your family been in South Surrey-White Rock?
About 10 years.
About 10 years,
Yeah.
okay. So
And you?
28 of my 28, brother. So yeah, besides the 4 I did my undergrad. So I got stake in how this conversation goes.
Me too.
Some things I think we might talk about based on some of our communication with him is I think we're going to talk a little bit about his support for senior programs, a little bit about how he's supporting some of sustainability initiatives, whether it's from JNR Home or just through the community, as well as all the other places that we can kind of pick apart some of his experience and knowledge and sort of expertise in our hometown. All right, guys, from my hometown, super thrilled to have him here. Also a graduate of my alma mater, Elgin Park Secondary. Super privileged to have him here, our local MLA, Trevor Halford. One thing I know for sure is that you've been busy lately. Mm-hmm. I think there was something I saw locally, Senior Expo Night. Let's just start there. Yeah. That was 1 or 2 nights ago?
Yeah, so that was actually my third Seniors Expo. So in my riding, and you live there now, and you've lived there all your life, pretty much, is we have a fair number of seniors, and it's great, right? And so when I first got elected, one of the things I wanted to do was have an event, one-day expo where we could have a bunch of vendors come in that offer services to seniors, and then have different guest speakers come in and really engage, right, and at a community level and make sure they know, number one, that I'm there and I'm there to support them, just like it would be anybody in the community. But number two is making sure that they realize that there's resources to help them. And I think one of the challenges that we have in my riding is that there's this perception, and it's a very inaccurate one, that everybody's high income. We definitely do have that, right? We definitely do have high income earners and big, beautiful properties and all this stuff. But we also have a huge number of whether they're families or seniors that are struggling, especially right now when you look at the affordability crisis that we're in. And so what I try and do is find vendors that can come in and can help, whether it's sources or whether it's Brella Group and can help with housing. And, we offer tax clinics and things like that to make sure that we're just trying to find every inch possible to give people the resources they need it when they're absolutely strapped right now. And so that was a big part of that. And we had over 50 vendors. We had over 500 seniors come in and out.
That's fantastic.
And the one thing I learned, there's 2 big things that you got to do. Number one is you gotta have some prizes to give away. And the second, the biggest draw that I've always had, and I've done it every year, is I hire Elvis. And I hire Steve Elliott. He's a local Elvis impersonator, and the guy is freaking fantastic. And he comes in there, and I swear, once I announce that he's coming, my office gets about 4 or 5 calls a day, just like, hey, is he going to be there? What time is he going to be there? He brings his pink Cadillac in, and if you check my socials, they're all up there.
Yeah. Makes the trip from Graceland.
He makes the trip from Graceland.
That's
right,
awesome.
Rock. But it's great, and everybody's up dancing, and it was a fantastic day, and looking forward to doing it again. But for me, it's about really, we do have a lot of seniors in that riding, and a lot of them are. They're dependent on their rent. They're making choices right now whether or not they're going to pay their rent, they're going to get their groceries, or whether they're going to pay for their prescriptions. Mm-hmm. So, and that's something that, sits very close to me, and I take it very important. And I am always, no matter what age my constituent is, I always am kind of looking out for the seniors in that riding, because it is something I take very, very seriously.
Good for you.
Yeah. Obviously, so the reason I kind of started with that is to kind of first say thank you, because you agreed to come on and do this over the stretch of the weekend that you were hosting this event, and you still managed to be in communication and make this work. So thank you, and kudos.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it.
So Stu, I think something that when you talk about that, it might mean something to us, is in the past 2 years, I've had two of my grandparents passed away in South Surrey-White Rock.
Yeah.
Stu's dad started the business, local guy, passed away a little while back.
Yeah.
And, these are initiatives that when you talk about them, I think about the people in my life and the people that are close. And it does make a difference. And I don't know, family to us, and that's something that Stu and I overlapped on, because his business is family, my business is family. And in terms of his mentorship for me, I don't want to overstep or anything, Stuart, but I feel like you have been candid in terms of some of the feedback and things like that. You grew up family business as well.
Yep.
What do you kind of take in terms of family business with you, in terms of how you operate with your constituency?
Well, I think a couple things. It's hard work, right? And I learned very early on, and much like your family, my family was kind of in the restaurant business in Ocean Park, and my mom still is. But part of the thing I realize is they're the last to get paid. Right. And, you've seen that firsthand, and you've seen that firsthand is that, they got to pay their employees before they pay themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that. I saw a mom that worked 6 days a week, every day. And she did that. So I was able to play hockey, so my brother could play soccer, and my sister could do the things that were important to her. And it was a great childhood, but you don't really realize until you're older and you're kind of doing those things too, is the sacrifices that they made. And, the challenges that they probably faced in deciding, can we pay for these hockey sticks? Can we pay for that trip? And, different things. And I never saw that where they couldn't. The thing is that with small businesses is that, especially like when you think about small businesses, like in Surrey, 95% of the businesses are small. They are, right? And they are a huge income generator in terms of how people are putting food on their tables, literally. And I think about, your family's business, and I had a bunch of friends that worked there, and they loved it. And I think that's a huge community icon out there, which your family's built. But we too now, in my role as an MLA, is we have to find ways to better support, right? I remember working with your family during COVID and trying to get the grants out. So, your parents didn't want to lay off people. And so they wanted to make sure they had the back patios open, right? So they could keep the staff and everything. Their primary goal when I was talking to them was that we just want to make sure that we're keeping our staff working. And I that's a huge testimonial, but it's also very common, right? What I found with small businesses, especially during the pandemic, is that a lot of them were making so many sacrifices just to make sure their employees were taken care of. And I think and so now when you look at it through the lens of government and policy and legislation and things that we do, I always kind of consider is, the impact that it's having on the lifeblood of our economy, which to me is, again, is small business.
Absolutely.
And so when we do things, right, that, the public may say are common sense and the right things to do, and they usually are, we have to say, okay, well, what is the impact there? And how do we help offset that, right? Like we have 5 paid sick days, and we don't want anybody going into work sick, right? But we also have to realize too is that when you do that, there's a huge cost to the employer when that's happening, right? So are there different ways that we can look and help offset those costs and different things like that? And I think that, at the end of the day, we need to be doing everything we can to support small business, not getting in the way and kind of suffocating it with bureaucracy and added costs.
Yeah. Stu, so period of time that you kind of referenced there, the pandemic, I haven't asked you much about what it was like in terms of that first initial shock, because Stu, what he does is, J&R Home. How was that initial shock for you in this industry? You've been in this industry your whole life, your dad raised you in it. Did you have any foresight that ended up being true? And did you slip up anywhere in terms of how you forecasted and maybe misread?
No, I think, like talking about family business, we started as a family business, started at the basement of our house. And So yeah, my parents made a lot of sacrifices too, and as soon as I left the house, they said, "Oh, we're taking over your bedroom, so you're no longer allowed to come back to show you." Yeah, so family business is I think it is the lifeblood of the Canadian economy, and it's important to support right across the country. Family businesses, small businesses.
Yeah.
Occasionally, sometimes they become mid-sized businesses, and sometimes larger businesses. But I think it's support during COVID was it was tough because we had a bunch of employees across the country that we kept gainfully employed. We had no revenue, but we kept them employed because we knew eventually something was going to happen. But it was a struggle. It was a lot of lost sleepless nights.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when it did come back, we had all these great employees that are part of the family.
Yeah.
That were able to go out and do the job.
You've been through, it's almost like mutual shared trauma at that point. Like you've been through something really terrifying and you made it through together.
Yeah.
And so I told my parents that you had so graciously agreed to come on with such quick notice. And they actually said to say thank you for all the work that you helped. That was like 3,000 pounds of restaurant furniture that my brother and I were bringing in and out every single day. But we knew that you had our back.
Yep.
And that meant a lot to us. And in terms of business, I come from a very spoiled generation. I was told this. So for context, a little bit more, my grandfather started a restaurant in 1978, Ocean Park Pizza and Village Pub in South Surrey. And I graduated 2018 and basically was working with my brother. And I thought that I was on top of the world because the workforce was steady. Income was coming into the restaurants. Costs of goods weren't as volatile. And then I was viciously humbled because, as you said, and as you referenced, you realize that nothing in life is a given. And it's just one bad day away from having to make a phone call where someone who you know that they have children to support, a partner, parents who are sick. If the business is making no money, what do we do? And we became tenacious in how we approach solutions.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't consider myself political. I look to work with people who I find active in solutions. Call that the rugby player in me. Like I see the goal line, let's go to it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that in terms of how you work. There's a lot of empathy in the way that you kind of approach issues. Empathy is something that I am working on more and more. And it's,
we all are.
Yeah. It's never ending.
Yeah, it's never ending, but it's, I don't want to use the word tactical, but it helps you be just a smarter person in how you approach, not negotiations per se, but just any conversation. Because if you're more of an empathetic person, you're a better listener. And if you're a better listener, then maybe you get your point across a bit better. Choosing your words maybe a bit wiser. In terms of for us, Stu and I mutually care a lot about sustainability. I know you do too.
Yeah.
Sometimes that conversation, there are shades of it that can get dicey in terms of when you use the word sustainability. To kind of hit the nail on the head, I'll say maybe it gets a bit political sometimes.
Yep.
How do we push that narrative forward while cutting around that? Because I and Stu don't have as much experience in navigating those tough conversations that somebody like you has, I'm sure, had to for so long.
Yeah, I think it's a form of evolution, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I remember my parents never did this, but I remember them telling me stories about how, like, when they would go through, when people would go through McDonald's or whatever it was, people just throw their trash out the window, right? And you think about the styrofoam containers and all the other stuff, and you evolve. And when I was growing up, when I was in elementary school, we didn't talk about climate change. Mm-hmm. We probably recycled, right? But we didn't really have those conversations until much later. And I look at where my kids are now, especially at the elementary school age, and the in terms of how they're conditioned to recycle, and how they're conditioned in terms of the materials that they use, and how they're not trying to waste anything, and they're bringing stuff back. And I think that that's a great thing. And they're learning more about, their surrounding areas. We live by the beach. And so they're, my daughter's way more educated on marine life and what's around White Rock Beach than I ever was. And I'm learning from her now. And I think that that's a great thing. And I think we have to be really honest with ourselves and say, okay, well, climate change is real.
Mhm.
And I think I don't know if that's really debate anymore, right?
Mhm.
I think people understand that. And, you see the level of forest fires that we're having, and you see floods and things like that. And it's having a significant impact on our economy, but it's having a significant impact on our way of life. And like, look at it 2 years ago, right? When we had the heat wave that we had, you know, we lost over 616 people in that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very short period of time, right? We lost a lot of people in White Rock.
Yeah.
And part of it is because, they're in these apartments that turn into just basically hot boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're doing things that are opening up their windows, and that was even sometimes making it worse. And so, we have to, we're not keeping up with where we need to be going, right? And you look at some of the units that we have in White Rock or other places in South Surrey, and they were built in the 50s and the 60s, even some in the 70s, that are just so out of date in terms of providing the care that we need, whether it's air conditioning and things like that. And we have some of our most vulnerable people in there now, and that's something that I've that's something I take very seriously. But when we talk about kind of where we're going with climate and things like that and sustainability, I think we all have to listen. Not all of us can afford or electric cars or want to be in an electric car, right? But we have to realize that things around us are changing.
Yeah.
And there's the notion of adapt or die. But we also have to find solutions that are also common sense and that are working, right?
What about enticing?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to do that. And I think that's a good thing. I think people always want to do the right thing. But when you look at it now, and part of the hard part is that everybody is so busy.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe it's always been like this, and I don't know, but everybody seems like they are so busy, and they're going from A to B, and they're going like a million miles, right? And especially when you have kids, and if you're helping out with kids and in different things, but everybody's plate seems to be so fully loaded right now. And so when that happens, you make sacrifices, and I think that we do have to have enticements to make sure that people are making the right necessary choices.
Yeah.
So breaking habits, right? I mean, really, it's how do you get someone to do the right thing, entice them, and break those bad habits, if you want to call it that. So,
well, it's even something like I think about my Greek grandparents, and they've both passed now. I love them. But when we in Surrey got our organics, recycling, garbage bins, I would go to their house once a week and sort through their stuff at the end of it, because it was all trash that everything just in the trash. Yeah. They didn't catch up to recycling, let alone organics. So ever since I was young, my brother and I would be like, let's just go. Kind of like with other relatives, we go tip the server after they pay the bill. Yeah. With my Greek grandfather, we just went and we made sure, because stuff like that is hard, especially for that generation that you were talking about earlier, because change is something that when we're younger, it's something we're more transient with. But as we get older, I don't know for sure, but it seems like it's something that maybe becomes a little bit harder. Habit breaking, like you said. What's effective in that?
Well, I think different things can be. I think monetary is always enticing, especially when when you're in an affordability crisis. But I think people are actually starting to see the results of climate change in real time.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think that's a left thing or a right thing or a center thing. I just think that it's being seen right now. And you think about all the farmland that we have and we're so proud of. And the droughts that can come along with that, or the flooding that comes along with that, and it can be quite destabilizing to our economy. And so we have to find different ways that, one is we got to make sure that we're doing the work, at least from the infrastructure side, to support, right? And I'm a big believer in infrastructure and getting infrastructure built, because number one, it helps the economy. Number two, it helps moves goods and services in a way that I think is environmentally sound, right? If you're cutting out on people using their car and different things like that, and you're finding a more streamlined in terms of, you look at it, and not to get political, and I won't, but you look at the Massey,
Hmm.
Like how many times you get stuck in the Massey Tunnel? Like,
Yeah, I agree. That's not political. I agree on
but
that
we
one.
should have
Yeah.
that Massey Bridge should have been open 2 years ago, right? And now we have cars. If it's whatever time it is right now, I guarantee you, it's all the way backed up on Highway 99 in both directions, and people are just sitting there idling in their cars. So not
Terrible.
only that is the pollution going up, but their time, right? We just talked about how busy people are in their time. And so part of it is I think the original design was to have a nice bridge there that could actually be designed to eventually have rapid transit that could come into South Surrey. And that's transformational. Like that's thinking ahead and I think that's where the public wants us to go.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think people I don't, know too many people that are absolutely glued to their cars, but I do know people that, there's not everybody can work from home. People have to get to different things, and not everybody can afford an electric vehicle, right? And not everybody can depend on public transit, right? Because they have different shift work, and you look at all the people, especially the new Canadians that are working up in the Campbell Heights area,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no rapid transit up there. There's no transit up there to begin with, and a lot of them are on shift work.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are getting off at 4 a.m, and and there's nowhere to pick them up, or there's no public transportation to get them from A to B. So we have to look at when we're doing stuff, and I know that there's a big push on to do housing and everything like that, and we need more housing. That debate's over, but you have to do the work ahead of time too. You have to build out the right infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
right? You got to make sure your roads and your sewers are there. You got to make sure that your hospitals can sustain the new people coming into that community, whether it's White Rock or South Surrey or any other community. So and it's not glamorous work, but you've got to do that work, because what's happening then is if you're not doing it, you're setting it up to fail, right? And I think that's the part where we're all struggling with right now, is we understand what we need, but you actually have to do the pre-work ahead of time. And unfortunately, we've really dropped the ball on that, and that hasn't been done. And I think that's why you're seeing the frustration, whether it's local government, provincial government, or residential, people in residences coming up and saying, like, hold on a second, like, what are we actually doing here? And a lot of it comes down to actually thinking ahead, and doing that work, and thinking about things that we need for the future. Like the amount of opposition that came when we did the Canada Line, right? There was every mayor nobody wanted the Canada Line.
Yeah.
I've never heard anybody come up to me in the last 15 years since it's been there and tell me that the Canada Line was a bad thing. I haven't.
But I feel like that again goes to like habit. Like people just change can sometimes just disrupt people enough where like change can be something that stimulates so much fear that people can weaponize that and say, no, you don't want this. You feel that gut feeling that, your neighborhood is going to, because I saw the same thing happen to my parents when they started expanding from the original restaurant that was sinking into the ground.
Yeah.
They wanted to build a new nice restaurant from 60 seats to 300 to employ more people, feed the community, whatever. But it's just sometimes when people hear something is coming, it disturbs them.
There's this romantic notion that change is bad.
Yeah.
And in some degrees it's bad. It can be bad. In some areas, like I went into that restaurant before all the time with my parents, and it was like one of those classic old school, like almost like a mafia set, where it was kind of dark and dimly lit, and the best pizza that you can get, and it was great, and the staff were always great, and you go in there, and I remember the glasses. I remember exactly what they look like, and I remember the carpet in there and everything. But change happens, and you just said it. You're now that restaurant can seat 300 people. You've probably tripled or quadrupled the amount of staff that you're going to need there. You're hosting different events there, and it's you're seeing the community come out there all the time, and I think that's a good thing. And there's always you kind of always have to. I call it kind of fighting through the noise, which is important to do, and because everybody will find fault with something. Right? Like, like kind of a classic example is I look at it with sports jerseys, like, everybody will find fault with whatever jersey the Canucks have.
Whatever's
Everybody
coming out,
wants
yeah.
to go back to the skate, right? Like, let's go back to the skate and everything like
But
that.
we hated the skate when it was
But
here.
then you
back
didn't
in
like
the
the skate when it
No.
was there, right? And now we'll go back to Johnny Canuck. And so I think people have this romantic notion of stuff in the past, but it wasn't always designed to be suitable.
Yeah.
Right. And, and I think that's just what happens when time passes, right? You think about, you have good memories, but things evolve and communities evolve too. And I think, for the communities that we live in and that I represent, and you guys obviously contribute to, I think the change has been good. But I think we need to make sure that we're bringing people along as that happens, right?
Well, yeah, the Greek philosopher in me says that one of the things that I was taught is the only thing that is that like change is always constant. Like the only thing in life that you can ever bet on is that the nature of everything around you is volatile and susceptible to change. We can only control the way that we react to things and the way that we process things.
Yep.
And I appreciate that you come from a place of introspection in that, because I think that leaders need to try and be that. And when it's hopefully my turn to be a leader in the context that you guys obviously are, I think about those things. And one of the things actually that kind of bridges all three of us together is Stuart was pretty much one of the patriarchs of community lacrosse in British Columbia. You started playing at what age, Stu?
5 in the old city of New Westminster.
Yeah, so kind of take us through your lacrosse experience a little bit.
Yeah, well, New Westminster is known as the home of Sound Bellies, and Queens Park Arena is we call it the old barn, and I basically lived in that place over the years.
So I got to ask you, did they actually have? They didn't have glass; they had fencing. Is that true?
Initially,
so it was actually
you're dating me now.
Yeah, they actually had chain link fencing around.
Yeah,
that's like old school WWE stuff there, man. Yeah. That's crazy.
I left a lot of blood on that floor that way. But no, it was then of course after going through and playing into my 30s and senior A, I felt the need to give back, so I spent a lot of time in the community coaching and giving back to the children of the neighborhood. So.
But you must hear so much of that stuff that we talk about, that Trevor talks about in terms of implementing leadership. What I love about sports is you could be a player, you could be a coach, you could be a parent. It teaches you a type of responsible involvement and how to be a role player in the role that you are. You kind of in blossoming, let's say you were an all-Canada level player. What were some of those challenges for you when you started coaching in terms of, let's say, those things that I think that Trevor, I respect you a lot for, is seeing things between the cracks. And I think that it's really hard to do that as a player. And as you grow into a coach, you get that a little bit more. Did that come to you early on, or is that something you felt like maybe, was there a challenge that you hit that then sort of dawned you into a new awakening of, okay, this is what it's like when I'm in charge of other people?
Yeah, I think nothing in specifically that I could say. All I would, the feedback I'd always give to the kids is, look after each other, be respectful on the floor, try and do the right things, work your tail off. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, if you're one of the best times I had coaching was when I had a team that was a C division team at the midget level, and at the end of the season we were an A division team and came second, and we almost won the provincials.
Bunch of misfits that just worked hard.
Exactly. Yeah. And they knew that they were all misfits that worked hard, like the Bad News Bears in the good old days. And that was probably the best. I coached the junior A level as well, but I think that was the most interesting experience, and the kids were awesome, and they really appreciated the fact that they took a lot out of it. So
then for you, I guess, what kind of, because I know you have things like, was it Coldest Night? You did a huge Coldest Night. What is it? Coldest Night on Earth?
Coldest Night of the year.
Coldest Night of the year. Yep. You guys raised a few $100,000.
Well, I was a small part in that, but yeah.
But you were a part.
But I was a part. But the community came together and did that, and we were quite successful. But yeah, and that's a great organization by Sources about getting funds.
Sources
to get people
Community
through.
Center, right? Okay, so my wife in particular, she is PhD neuroscience. You also are doing stuff with dementia.
Yeah.
Tell us don't tell I am who I. It's something like I am who I am initiative. Something like I still am.
Yeah,
I can't.
so that was something we were doing. Well, I wasn't doing, but supportive with organizations like Brella,
Yeah.
right? And they really work with adults with dementia. I think everybody has now has family or a very close personal friend that has experienced that, and it can be very obviously it's very difficult for the individual to go through, but also the family and those closest to it. And I'm really proud that we have organizations in our community that are focused on not just helping that individual, but also helping the family, right? And getting them respite care and getting them, whether it's a spouse that just needs like 4 days away to go away and just recharge, and doing that. And we have organizations in our community like Brella that will do that, but they need help too, right? And I think the biggest thing that we can do, and that I try and do in my role, is obviously advocate internally in government, try and get them the support they can, but also publicly, right? So people know that they're out there and that they do need support and that they're worthy of that support. So pretty proud of that.
Do you feel like a lot of these beliefs, because you've had some great mentors like Gordy Hogue and other guys, who would you say in terms of you has kind of defined your core principles in terms of what you bring to the table in terms of these beliefs? Like how much is it you, I guess, and who do you think of like these are the parts of me that I'm pulling from other people?
Yeah, I think number one, my grandparents, and just probably like you, is that my best memories as a kid were all based around my grandparents. I love my grandparents. I love my parents. My grandparents were they got me involved in politics. They got me involved in everything, and they were, my grandpa was literally, I'll say, he was my best friend, and my grandma was, she was everything to me, and and they're not with us anymore, but they're always with me, and I kind of use them as a bit of a compass, and they were so different people, right? Like my grandpa was very by the book and regimented, and my grandma was a little bit more like, let's have some fun and let's do things a little bit differently. And you would think that they're so opposite, but somehow it worked. And I try and do that with my personality a little bit. But for people that I've surrounded myself with, at top of that list would be Diane Watts. And I can't think of somebody that's been better for our community than Diane has. And I'm proud to call her, a really, really close friend, and somebody I talk to almost daily.
That's awesome.
And just for advice. And, and she's the kind of person too that'll phone me and say, hey, listen, you need to take care of yourself, right? Like you need to recharge and you need to reset. And, she's been through those battles and she gets it. And she also knows how to kind of what's real and what's not and how to shut off that noise. So you kind of plagiarize from, you steal from different people, but it all comes back to kind of, you'll change, but your principles shouldn't, right? So you'll evolve and your thinking will evolve, and maybe you'll have different thoughts on different subjects, but at the end of the day, your principles will always be what they usually always are, right? I think I'm that way, and I try and do my best, and I try and do things in a way that I've got 3 kids, and I want to make sure that they're proud of what their dad is doing every day. But you have to do things and every decision is not black and white either, right? And so you got to find ways to kind of build consensus, and and it's always kind of a give and take, right? And I think the one of the biggest things that I've learned in this job, and I learned it early, which is good, is especially in everything, but I'll use the business community as an example, and they just want an answer, right? And they just want to know, and they may not like it, but they just want to know, right? And I think people are like that too when they come in and they just want to know, right? Like, is this possible?
Mm.
Right? Can you help me get this done? And in most cases, we do whatever we can to get that done. But when you say, hey, listen, like this is where we are, and this is what I can do, and this is what I can't do, and they say thank you, because they don't want to walk out of there and have hope that's not reality. And I don't want to set myself up for that, and I definitely don't want to set them up for that, right? And I kind of do that in my relationships too now, right? And I think as politicians, is you're so conditioned not to have anybody dislike you. But the problem is that when you don't deliver, people will dislike you because you haven't kept your word. So for me, I really try and make sure that I'm very transparent and honest with people when we're working on different things about what I think I can and can't do. And people just want to know that you're doing your best and that you're honest and you're open with them.
Yeah. Stu, obviously your dad started the company, so that's a big one. But besides him, who are kind of your mentors that you look back on and say, here's who I bring with me?
My grandparents,
Yeah.
Who lived in South Surrey, actually. They retired in South Surrey.
Awesome.
And White Rock. They were awesome. He was have generations of people in the fire department in Westminster from day one, I guess. There was, I think, the great grandfather was one of the first firemen in the city.
Awesome.
And so yeah, they were awesome, and they were fun, and like yourself, they were two diverse people, but they made it happen for sure.
Yeah.
And one other person would probably be my phys ed coach or phys ed teacher, in high school.
Yeah. What about that person would you say?
He was very supportive.
Yeah.
In so many different ways. I used to play a lot of sports in high school, rugby, basketball, and we always had really good teams back then.
Yeah.
Always with the provincial championships, and he was a good mentor. And then after high school, he did sport as well. So
I think that a lot of the best mentors that I've had made me feel seen, and that didn't mean seen for all of the good bits. It meant they saw the weakness too. I'll call it what it is, which is I think is weakness, and they were able to, I wouldn't say maybe diagnose, but help nudge me in the direction of improvement.
Absolutely.
And a huge thing in mentorship is kind of just like with relationships, where part of it is almost just like a gut feeling of accepting. And there's a yin and yang to it. Like grandparents, your guard is down because you almost feel that the blood is yours. Yeah. And I am very lucky that with Greek principles, sort of the same thing. I was always taught to respect my grandparents. And I'm really lucky that I think that I don't live with a lot of regrets now about how they passed and the stuff that I missed out on. Yeah. So, but I'm super fortunate that my grandparents passed away in my mid-20s. A lot of people don't get that opportunity. You talked about how your grandparents had a different relationship. They didn't have a different relationship. They were different people within a wonderful relationship.
Yeah.
That helps you identify the benefits of, let's call it diversity.
Yeah.
Of seeing how different perspectives, different upbringings, all that stuff makes a difference. I applaud you because something you're good at is, and just you as a guy that I know, and you as a politician, as a sportsman, you almost don't change hats. You almost wear all of them at the same time. So conversation is very enjoyable with you, Trevor, because it can be something where shooting the crap, or it can be something of substance. I think that is like a very tough skill. How have you navigated, how have you navigated the social part of it, where in your work, you sometimes have to upset people, even if you think highly of them? Because you have to stick to, what did you say? Your principles are what they are. Yeah. How do you console yourself when principles might upset people?
I think you just have to be conditioned to it. And I think a lot of what we do, like, I go through question period, and, you raise your voice and you're passionate and you argue and you shoot back and forth and whatever it is. And there's some theater to that, but there's also a lot of emotion and anger to that too, right? You get pissed off on both sides of it. And I do get pissed off. And sometimes that gets the better of me, and that's an edge that I have that actually, to be honest with you, I don't want to lose.
Yeah.
Right? Because I've always had that. Even when I was, when I was playing sports, I was like this tall and everybody else was that tall, and I was getting tossed around everywhere. And so I had to have an edge. Like I had to be able to defend myself and fight. And I've never lost that. And I like being an underdog. And it's kind of where I'm at my best. But I think in terms of, you don't, in order to get what you need, I don't think you have to sacrifice your principles to do that. I think you just have to work hard. And you have to have a plan. Like the one thing is I don't get up and I don't wing it every day. I've got to have a plan, because then I'm just treading water, right? Where, we got an election coming up. I think a lot of people are discounting us where we are in the polls, and I've got to shut that out. And what I've got to do is I've got to reach out to everybody in my community, and I've got to make sure they know who I am and what I stand for and what I'm committed to do. And now, is everybody going to like that? No. But I think my message will resonate with a lot of people. And I need to make sure I'm doing that for some of my colleagues that are running in other areas that are close to me. And it's kind of like a team sport that way. Now, you get in there and you debate people, and people will get offended and they'll get upset. And that's life. And I don't always apologize for it. But, politics can be a contact sport. I don't mind that.
Yeah,
I don't mind it at all.
Fair enough. I think that the sports analogy of it, because I think that is such a true thing that for us, maybe to whoever's listening, it might not resonate to them as much, but for us, I almost defer to my sports lens on things, which has caused me some problems. I had some success earlier in my career playing Team Canada level rugby, got a scholarship to play. You almost need to have this blind belief that like I'm the best. And as I grew older, I started making mistakes, trying to carry that, not aggression, but chip on my shoulder. Like you said, like I got to be the best at everything. And I'm at this point again where I really want to learn, and I don't think I know everything. And I think as a politician, something I look for in, I don't maybe want to say politician, but just people I respect, is what we kind of said at the beginning, is like the ability to listen. And when I think of you, Trevor, it meant a lot that, so about a month ago, we just touched base and you congratulated us on the rugby championships that we won at our alma mater. 3 years in a row, the first ever 3 championships.
Congratulations.
In 3 consecutive years. That was awesome. He signed the banners, took a look. But we also talked about other things too. We talked about family, the pandemic, sustainability. Talked about you, Stuart, because part of our wonderful sponsor, J&R Home, is they pretty much came to me a little while back, and I grew up a part of the Surrey Climate Emissions Planning Committee. And basically what that was you talk about your children having this education. I was lucky that near the end of my high school experience, the city integrated me, someone they identified maybe as a potential leader one day, hopefully, I don't know, because I look at what you guys are and I want to be things that you are. And they integrated me into those conversations. And being integrated, being at the table is one thing, and that's half of the conversation, or half of the confidence, we'll say. The other half and the other portion of it is actually feeling like your voice is heard and that your voice is valued, and that if you invest time in your opinions, that people will hear them. And so I actually, in terms of my upbringing and my education, the city of Surrey didn't fail me. And I'm super lucky in that. Elgin Park provided me those opportunities to kind of think about some of these issues. So it's led to this place where we have these great chairs. Stu and I felt great because we designed these. We brought manufacturing, are bringing manufacturing to Canada, doing the best we can. Trying. Yeah. And we do all of this work. And then it comes down to the thing that I told you, where we're realizing that, okay, with all of this education that I had, with all this education that your children are receiving, we don't have an option for recycling these, Trevor.
Yeah.
And there is no viable option. I've met with Circular Economy Leadership Canada, CELC, a wonderful nonprofit, Mind Your Plastic, Canada Plastics Pact. Even Stephen Guibault has answered my email about this. Wow. And everyone is kind of putting their heads together and saying, hey, you're right. That concern that I have, which is, hey, fantastic, we do this work making recyclable plastic out of or recyclable furniture out of recycled goods. Yeah. Well, that's all great, but how are we going to viably, like you said, make sure that this is recycled and not put, like you said, at a McDonald's thrown out the side of it, because
Or in a landfill.
at the end of the day, that's what a landfill is, though, right? So for us, and I guess in some of the advice that I'm looking for from you, Trevor, is like, how do I, as a civilian, keep approaching that conversation? And not with you, because you've been more than supportive.
Yeah.
How do I keep digging at this and figuring out my way to close the loop? Because I feel like I've let down my role in the circular economy by not having something organized in terms of the end of this life cycle for this piece of furniture.
Yeah, well, I think that one is the conversation,
Yeah.
right? And I think that it's two is just expanding what you guys are doing, especially this podcast, is expanding your audience and expanding your networks.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's going to listen to this and say, well, maybe this is something I've been thinking about or I've been working on.
Mm-hmm.
And I can contribute to this,
Yeah.
right? And so that's part of it, is just getting that out there, and people will pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
And especially right now. And there's a couple of things. One is because people are realizing that, you know, we have to do things differently in terms of our climate. We have no choice. We have to do that. Second thing is people are also realizing that we need a better lifespan out of some of our materials, just for an affordability point of view, right? And we need things to last longer than what they typically do. And I think that that's not only a challenge, but it's an opportunity. I've always said, you know, never let a crisis go by without utilizing it, right? And I think you can do that because you can always learn, and there's always different opportunities too, right? I think COVID was a horrible crisis, but I think there was a lot of lessons learned in terms of that, right? And I think there's thousands of lessons that were learned in that. And I think with this too is what you guys are embarking on is something extraordinary. But I also think that the more people that you're reaching, and the more that you're communicating with them, they're gonna come to the forefront and say, I can help with that.
But you even helped me in our conversation to think about other ways, because I was at the point that we discussed, I was feeling discouraged about the support that was available for us. Yeah. But you encouraged me in thinking about options such as donating them to hospice, other places such as that. So you almost expanded not my understanding, but you made me feel a lot better. Because for us, that's great. We can have the best intention in the world, but there are pragmatic elements of implementing a circular economy that Stuart, I know, cares a lot about, and that Stuart has me here because I've dedicated a lot of my life to that.
Yeah. So for instance, like we have, you know, we try, and my office really focuses in White Rock. We've got quite a large homeless problem right now. Yeah. And one lady, we were able to, so thankful we got her off the street into an apartment. And when she went in there, she had nothing, right? She had nothing. So we went around and got her, you know, a bed, a dresser, and I don't think, besides the mattress we got, that was new, but nothing else was new. But it was nice, right? And it was hers. And for the first time, she had things that she could call her own, and she had a door that she could lock. And that was a huge turning point in her life. But, you know, in terms of the materials that we were putting into her new apartment, it was all stuff that, you know, we were finding and that, you know, was ready for a second life, right? So, and that to me is the best kind of recycling, right? The sustainability is when you're doing that, because it's pretty special.
So in terms of what we talked about with kind of my ideas for making sure we can help implement programs like this locally, where do you think that Stu and I should almost go from here? I know expand the network, we'll keep doing this podcast, but in terms of, let's go back to the tangibles. What can we do to not lobby for these changes, but make sure that it is active, that it's being heard? And things like this cost money to implement.
Yep.
So there's always logistics in terms of that. We want to push as hard as we can as a team. So how do we collaborate in that the best we can, besides, let's say, networking?
Yeah, so I think that I'm a big believer in plagiarism. You know, literal plagiarism. But everybody's gonna be looking at my speeches through Google, but no, they're my own. But so I'm a big believer. If somebody's doing it right, then figure out who they are and how they're doing it, and how you can emulate that, right? And I guarantee you somebody in this planet is doing it right.
Yeah, that's true.
And you got to find out how they're doing it. And their jurisdiction's probably maybe similar to ours, maybe it's dramatically different.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, right now, especially with where we are and where we're going, I think there's going to be an appetite to support the initiatives that you guys are doing, right?
Yeah.
So I would find, who's doing this well and the level of support they're getting,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how they're doing that, and then and you kind of work backwards from there. And
Mm-hmm.
you say, okay, so quite often people will come into my office and they'll say, I really want you to champion this policy.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, well, where are they doing it? Well, they're doing it in Sweden, or they're doing it in Finland, or they're doing it here, and it's working. And nobody has the market on good ideas,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not a monopoly, and I think a good idea is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
And we can. I think we can take it, and you can make it your own.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be the first thing. Is I'd say I would look around. I guarantee you somebody's doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And maybe how they're doing it is not the way that you want to do it, but there's different pieces that you can take and you can adapt and
precedent.
Yeah, exactly, right? And then how you kind of bring that to the forefront, and then how you get that level of support,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how you bring, whether it's a provincial, whether it's a federal, or whether it's a municipal government along. Because at the end of the day, there's a few things that are going on that you guys, I think, are really in a good position for. Number one is you're creating jobs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then the second is that you're also obviously very environmentally conscious of what you're doing. And I think that those two things, I think for any government, whether left, center, right, doesn't matter. I think that will resonate with them because it's important. It's economic, and it's the right thing to do.
And that's just it too. If I want to give human beings the credit of being able to read sincerity.
Yeah.
And if we are sincere in our efforts, I hope that is sincerely appreciated. And we have put a lot of logistical work into making sure, like, we want it to look good. We want it to be comfortable. We want to create jobs within Canada, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And we're working really hard at it.
And so the other thing I'd say that too is to both you guys is, like, don't be ashamed to tell your story. And maybe your story is newer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I know the story of Ocean Park Pizza.
Mm-hmm.
I've known that story for 20 years,
mm-hmm.
right? And the whole community knows that story, and it's something that they take pride in.
Yeah.
And your story is new, and it's kind of just beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But you can tell that story,
mm-hmm.
right? And people, that humanizes it a lot.
Yeah. And
so people really gravitate towards that, because you're not just talking about numbers and different things and different figures. You're talking about the the really human element of it.
Change.
Yeah.
Like we were talking
Exactly.
about earlier.
Yeah.
Stu, to be fair, the way that he approached, and kind of, because the way that Stu and I approached our first couple of meetings about this is I'm a proud person, Stu's a proud person, so we wanted to believe we were helping each other.
Yeah.
And the word that he used that almost hooked me into going along with him totally trusting was, he used the word legacy. And he wanted to be critical of what his legacy would be. And so that brought us to where we are now, sitting in these chairs. And I appreciate that you've put that critical thought into it, because, to be fair, Stuart, like, you have changed in the time that I've known, the years that I've known you too, in the ways that you have become more mindful about the issues that maybe I was more educated on. We've talked as friends, family friends, for a long time. Well, the dialogue that you've been having with me, I appreciate the education that you've been putting yourself through too, because I don't think I hear when you speak about some of these textile exchange, global recycled standard furniture items that you're making. And I know some people tell you it's maybe too soon, maybe it's not the time. And you have to tenaciously advocate that, okay, you know what, it might not be the time for you yet, but the time is coming. And that is kind of the sake of the show, is looking ahead.
Yeah.
And Stu was really one of the inspirations for that, because he's had to stick his heels in some pretty slippery turf to try and make sure that you can stick up for this idea. And I came into it later than you started it. And it's been a hell of a lot of work for me to advocate for it. And I came at the part where it was already what you had. Mm-hmm. So kudos to you too.
Thank you. Well, I think to add to that, in 25 years of traveling the globe and doing manufacturing overseas, working with great customers in North America, like Home Depot, Walmart, Amazon, people like that. I've seen what manufacturing in these poor countries can actually do to their environment.
Mm-hmm.
I was in 8 countries in 2 months. We're doing work and a little bit of holidays, and every beach I went to, from South Africa to Vietnam to China, you could swim, but there's plastic floating around.
Mm-hmm.
It just wasn't a good environment.
Mm-hmm.
So that we need to get plastic out of the environment.
Yeah.
Pure and simple. Out of the landfills, pure and simple.
Yeah.
So that's my drive to have this podcast, meet with good people like yourself, and make this happen, because it has to for the globe.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just like anything. You go look at a beautiful view and you think, what if, right? And there are relationships we have in our lives we can't really remove those what ifs from, but our relationship with the planet isn't one of those. We have the power to, and the great thing is you think about things like the pandemic, and it breaks my heart. I had extended family get very sick. I had friends pass. It was horrible, but we saw other parts of, like, what was it, like dolphins returning to off the shores of the US where they had never been before, and pods of whales just off the coast of BC, closer than they've ever been. When we do our parts, not even in sustainability, and I don't even know if sustainability is enough anymore. It almost needs to be planet rejuvenation, and that is possible. And that's kind of our MO. Is a mentor of mine, Tracy Reddy, CEO of Science World. Yep. She's one of our guests here as well. That was something that she turned my head to, and basically, she for her, sustainability stopped being good enough. And I think that there's so much strength in looking at something that not even everybody's with, and then taking it a step further and saying, okay, that's great. We have these chairs, they're recyclable, but let's push it a step further. Like for us, for Stu, and I won't speak, for everybody else, but it seems like there's been a lot of that genuine care, and that's been great. And you met us with that, or you met me with that when I brought it up to you, as well as the other things, and I really appreciated that.
Absolutely.
It's been a long history of that with you, Trevor, since it's hard in South Surrey Ocean Park, White Rock, to survive that long publicly. And your family, people have known you guys for a long time. The fact you still have respect in a small town is
talk to my teachers.
Yeah, you know what?
I run into my teachers and
you know what? I do run into your teachers, and they do like you, Trevor. So because a lot of
You're
them,
the right ones then.
But you know what though? It's hindsight, and that forgiveness that teachers have given you and me and Stuart.
I needed a lot of it.
Your phys ed. It's funny you mentioned teachers. Teachers are a vulnerable thing. Your wife is in healthcare?
No, Holly is owner operator of childcare.
Childcare.
Childcare, yeah.
Amazing.
She does a great job. So she's she's doing great work in White Rock and South Surrey, and very, very proud of her.
Okay, awesome.
So taking care of all those kids.
Yeah, Holly, how long have you guys been together now?
Long time. About 13 years.
13 years.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's for me, Stuart. This has been fantastic. If you guys want, we could keep talking after this, but I think for me, I really appreciate your time today.
It's been great, guys.
This has been great.
Spent, man.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Trevor. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah. Let's bring it in.
Thanks, man.
We'll see you soon, man.
All right, buddy. Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Folks, thanks again for joining us. We have so many things to discuss and so much ground to cover that today really was just a brief moment that we're going to be spending on a much larger conversation. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for investing your time in the future of this planet, and we hope to see you again soon.